What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catapaglia sitting on the couch making some money investing in fractional real estate online, as usual. Lately, I've been starting to think that Lofty's decentralized ownership and governance of, small investment properties is somewhat a failed experiment. And I'm going to go on and complain about them a little bit more, like I have quite a bit lately, but sort of just get into the nuance of it. But after that, I'm going to talk about where I think the opportunity lies in all this, and that's what I think. My goal here is to help all of us make money, right? I think I want to see the fractional real estate investing, universe grow and expand and have, all sorts of us maybe take on different roles and helping shape the future, but also make a bunch of money as we go, right? And I think part of the way we do that is by um, picking platforms well, right? Voting with our money, but also within the platforms, picking properties well. Again, just making that vote with our money, right? Like picking the ones that make a lot of sense. But then, and also, hopefully having a little bit of a unified ability to complain and suggest changes and whatnot. So, what do I mean by it being a failed experiment? I mean, obviously, there's a couple properties on the platform that do reasonably well. But there are a lot of them that do poorly, and I think the assumptions. I'm going to give you a couple examples, and then, like I said, we'll wrap around to where maybe this is creating some opportunities for us, right? So this is one 1388 Penhurst Road. I started buying this when it was already for sale. There's been some there hasn't been a whole lot of voting except for when offers come in, and when they do come in, it takes us a long time to respond, and we don't get any real back and forth with the agent. And I think that we just keep spooking buyers because we take a couple days to respond, and then we give them a stupid counter. The most recent one of these, we had a $47,000 cash offer that they had already I think they had started at 44. We countered, they came at 47 and said that's our absolute best. And somehow the other owners in this group thought, let's counter, try to get $1,500 more, right? Like it's just uh I'm never going to try to lose a deal over $1,500, right? It's less than a dollar per token, I think, at the current token price. We've had this where we've been trying to sell this for a while. Let's see. Oh, it's a slightly over a dollar per token, right, at the current token price. Um, I think it was a foolish decision to try to counter that. Maybe we'll hold on to them, but we've already lost one buyer by just sort of being slow. Um, so that's one problem, right? When we're trying to negotiate now, we can assign a person to sort of run the deal and negotiate, but when we've put up votes to do this on different deals, we haven't had much success getting everybody to agree to just let that person actually run with it and make decisions, right? Like they're trying to put too much of a framework around it. Like, okay, well, we're still going to have to vote on every offer that comes in. And if we do that, I think that's problematic, right? Nobody really has any ability to make decisions. But also on this one, there's a real good example. This was listed for a while, and it seems like nobody actually had been in the home. Like I don't think the listing agent had been in there because I talked to the current listing agent. I talked to him. He showed up, looked at the property, and sent pictures of damage that we were completely unaware of. And the listing agent, I don't think knew about it because his opinion of the value of the property went from being like 75,000 to being 35,000 over the course of just a couple of weeks. And so I think one of the that's a problem of there's nobody really driving the bus, right? Like, so for example, in my own personal investments, this would never happen, right? I would walk through this property, or if I'm doing it remotely, I would have somebody, if I'm buying whole properties remotely, it is worth my time to pay people to really, to send me video of the inside and whatnot. So one of the problems here is that there's just nobody owns enough of it to really make it worth their time to sort of police these issues, right? To be on top of them, and so we have a twofold problem, right? One, and then there you get like sort of this bystander problem where everybody thinks somebody else is looking at stuff, or everybody thinks somebody else is, going to come up with a plan, and so a lot of times stuff just sits for a long time. And then, like, so for example, this property, Odom, it's one I've been talking about for a while. I've accumulated a decent stake in it. This is actually my biggest holding on Lofty, but my percent, I only own about 3% of this, but there's hardly anybody that owns more than me. There's quite a few, there's like three or four people that have about the same. I think there's one that has a bigger stake, but so nobody owns enough of this to really, for it to really be worth their time. The votes on this have been sort of ridiculous where we voted to sell, but then they voted to keep, okay, we're going to list it, but we're going to keep running it as a midterm rental. So then the agent that we had voted to hire said no, she wasn't going to do that, which I don't blame her. I wouldn't do it if I'm trying to take a listing. I don't want it to have guests in it, right? I mean, it's just too difficult. Uh, or you just don't expect it to be a successful sale. And then we decided, we've just gone back and forth. We went to look at it started as a long-term rental, I think, with a small short-term rental, and then they switched the whole thing to mid-term rental. This was before I got there. Um, it's priced, the total price is just way too high relative to the income it's making as a midterm rental. We looked at getting some cash offers, but that, we were kind of slow with that. And over the period of a couple of weeks of dealing with this, that price moved down, down, down because the market's not doing great. So we end up having, being really slow for one, because everything has to wait for a vote, but also two, we sort of lack direction because there's so many people that have different ideas. And so for this one, it's one where I think there's the potential to make it a great like pad split co-living style property. Um, it's 5 bedrooms, 3 baths, but if anybody wanted to just set up and run it as 5 bedrooms, well, you're not bringing in enough revenue as a by the bedroom. But it's also, let's see, why isn't that? Oh yeah, there we go. It's 3,700 square feet, and three and a half bath. This says 3 baths, but I think it's actually 3.5 baths. Um, so looking at it, where pad split, what they do is that style is there really is nothing except bedrooms and a kitchen, maybe, small eating area, small or eating kitchen. And so I believe that this property could probably be cut up into between 8 and 10 bedrooms. Well, at 8 bedrooms, it's probably not worth the effort. Um, but at 10, it becomes really interesting. It would take me, if I were, if this were my market and I went to this property, it would take me all of 15 minutes of being in the home to be able to figure out, well, is it feasible to cut this up into 10, right? Like, where are we, so are two of the bathrooms private? Because that's what it seems like at the moment. Could we make them shared somehow? Like figuring out how to rearrange floor plans is tough to do when you're not physically in the property. Even if you're given floor plans, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to really understand, like, okay, what's above this, right? Like, if we're going to try to start moving walls, do we expect there to be plumbing going through certain walls and whatnot? I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that if somebody with experience is in the home, in the market, making that decision of how we're going to change this becomes much easier. And I think even, if there had been somebody like that looking out for this property in the very beginning, they probably never would have tried to run it as a long-term rental with this little, with the mother-in-law suite being run as a short-term rental, or however they were actually trying to do it. I mean, it was problematic almost immediately. Um, but it takes, and so I know they have this co-ownership model where the person who brings it to the platform has to hold some amount of they have to keep some portion of the ownership, but a lot of those people are very absentee. It's not like they're actually driving the bus. I mean, I think what we really need is more of a sponsor type model where it is, kind of like a syndication where you have the one person that's driving the bus. And I know that becomes problematic from from a security standpoint. And I don't know how far, how closely or far they can push that, right? But I mean, like on Mogul, we're not making day-to-day decisions. If they were going to make, major changes, we're not going to vote on really anything other than maybe a refinance or a sale. Anything else, it seems like they're just going to handle for us. And I don't necessarily think it has to go that far, but I think that if you have, um, I think that you really have to have somebody, the co-owners themselves need to be people that are experienced and have more control than they currently do. And then also, obviously, if we think they're doing something completely, unhinged, of course we should be able to stop them. But to, but if they're, I think we need them both for the, to give the direction, not necessarily for the decision making. So, for example, we need someone in this market. So we've already run into we've had to hire a locksmith twice. We've had a problem. One of the other investors in this platform has been kind enough to go to the property and take some video and help out like that. Um, but honestly, I don't know. I don't know what the motivation is for him because it is, unless he's a huge owner in this, it's definitely not worth his time, I wouldn't think. Um, because even if it's if you're having a big impact on it, and that's where I think the problem is, right? Like I think um, there needs to be somebody who it's worthwhile for them to really own the thought process and the planning. And because one of the things is real estate, one of the reasons I invest in real estate is to control the investment. If you buy a stock, if I buy, Coke stock, okay, maybe I can buy a little bit of extra Coke, but I can't do anything to change, the price, the stock price of Coke in any, really at all, right? Like, I mean, I could only drink Coke for the rest of my life. It's not going to move the stock price a cent, excuse me, 1 cent. But when I buy a property, I have complete control over it. Maybe I buy it as a long-term rental. Okay, that's the market's shifted. Something's different. Okay, I switch it to a mid-term or switch it to short-term. That type of control, maybe I sell it with financing, right? That type of control requires a real understanding of the market, right? And so, like, none of us are in this market and really see what's going on, see what other properties on the street look like. Sure, when we're doing our due diligence, we're using Street View, we're using all these different things, but I don't know that it really, we really have the ability to make good decisions. Especially what I've noticed is we have a bunch of these wonky homes where, like, it's possible that the way this property is cut up, it's never going to work for 8 to 10 bedrooms. Um, you know, I think it would. It seems like there's a real potential, but somebody that understands how to do that is going to have to show up at the property, spend some time there, and then if we do decide to do that, okay, we need to do a capital call to have to the cash to do it, and we're probably going to spend 25, 30, $40,000, depending on, how many rooms we're going to do. Are we going to add a bathroom? Are we going to have to move plumbing at all as far as in the existing bathrooms in order to open up, like, say, the master bath to the main hallway or something like that, so that it can be a shared bath? All those sorts of things. Um, you know, it's tough for us to figure. So like somebody in the Discord posted a picture of a crack in the wall, and this to me, I was like, well, is this new? Like, where did this come from? But then I looked it up in I spent some time looking in the old records, and oh, we had a picture of that crack in the wall all the way back in January. We actually had uh, an estimate to fix several of the cracks. It wasn't going to be a bunch of money, but when that first got posted there, it made me really worry. Like, oh, is there something new going on in this with this property that we don't know about? And that's the other thing too is if I'm the one, it's my property, I'm running it, I'm going to be on top of, I'm going to know that that existed, and it's going to, I don't think I would have listed the property for sale without having taken care of that, right? um, so there's that issue, right? And then you have ones like this is one that I've been buying for a while. Actually, this is my largest percentage stake, even though it's not a lot of money because the tokens have been cheap. um, but this is one where, I had suggested we vote to change management. I felt like the new manager was doing a pretty good job. But there are, a lot of issues with it, the property that need like some new capital as far as it's going to need a new AC. It had been vacant for a while. We had a capital call. We're paying back a loan. So it's not doing very well. And then we had a vote, and Waylick is going to take it over. And, that is that's fine, but as a long-term rental, like, are we really getting the most out of this property? So one of the things that I had been looking at, because I was trying to figure out, like, well, what else could we do with this? Oh, did I? No, I didn't. So I was looking at the AirDNA, and this is looks like a surprisingly good market for a small little two-bedroom, one-bath short-term rental. And I was really surprised by this. I mean, this one made $13,000 and only 126 days of availability last year. Um, but when I was looking through all of these, there are people with just these like cute little two-bedroom homes that have turned those into real money makers. It looks like that could be a real opportunity here. But if we were going to switch to that, okay, who sets up the furniture? Who does the decor? Sure, we could hire all of that out. But and this was actually my point about the Odom one too. Is for certain projects like that, like if I'm doing some construction in a project in a property that I own, I want to stop by that property every day, or I want to get somebody who is on my side, not the contractor, not the agent, not somebody, somebody who actually just works for me, should be in that property every single day, seeing what the progress looks like. And we just can't, like, that's just not manageable. It's not worth it. Even if a co-owner brought the property to the platform, it's not worth their time to do it if they only own 10 or 15 or 20%. If they're also the manager and they're getting some percent of that, maybe it is, or we pay them some fee for the oversight. But these types of processes is where I think things really can break down. I know some of the co-owners are doing a good job with that. Like Earl seems to really know his properties, right? You really understand them. He does a good job of like using TaskRabbit and using all these other resources to get people there to the property to see what's going on. But even there are just limits to what you can do without like a local presence, right? To be able to look at these. And so um, I don't know going forward. I'll be really selective about any co-owners that I invest in their properties if they aren't in that, if they're bringing properties to the market that aren't local to them, right? And so and then the other one, was this one I did a video on the other day. I'm gonna try to do a new thing where, like, right in the middle of this video, there's like a little thing that pops up somewhere on the screen, and it'll show you that old video. You can click on it or not if you already watched it. It's actually just something I learned how to do, I think. So we'll see. If it's not on there, please put a comment and be like, "What are you talking about?" There's no link that popped up on the screen right now. I appreciate you guys all helping me out with my channel with stuff like that. Because I'm still learning. This is very much like a seventh career for me, being a YouTuber. I'll go into all the other ones some other time. But anyway, this is one where it just has the most ridiculous floor plan ever. And until like an agent went through and videoed it, and that video is attached to, if you go back and read all the comments, you can figure it out. But it is, if we wanted to do a construction project to turn this into like what I think is probably the best, I've thought about this more since that video. I think turning this into a 3-2 makes a lot of sense and is probably not the biggest project in the world, but I don't know that that it's something that the DAO could successfully do through voting, and the oversight of that I think would just be too difficult. Okay, so lots of complaining. Where's the opportunity, right? Well, this property. Oh, did I close it? Well, Oh no, it's right here. We currently have it listed for sale. It's $550,000. We've already voted on what we would accept as far as financing, and we're willing to own or finance this deal, right? This is owned free and clear. There's a little bit, there's some debts and stuff that have to be paid off, but we're not asking for a ton of money down. It's $100,000 down, but on a 550,000 property, there's a deal to be had. If I were in this market, I'd probably, I'd go take a look at it, and I would probably buy this from the Dow, uh, take advantage of the financing that they're doing, and well, but I'd have to go and look and see, okay, can I actually turn this into eight, nine, or 10 bedrooms? How am I really going to rent this out as a pad split? Um, and then if I think it works for that, then I'll have to be the one that would oversee it, right? But like, so buying this and taking it off the platform, but taking advantage of the fact that we know what that financing looks like, right? Like, there's so many of these deals right now that can't sell for what people want, and so we're offering owner financing. And so, as a real estate investor, people are always looking for, motivated sellers and flexible financing. And I think because this is a purely financial decision and one for most of the owners where they've already lost money, right? Like, they're just trying to recoup whatever they can. Um, I say they because I'm in most of these deals for significantly less than, most of them. My basis is, well below what the value of these properties is today. But for Odom, it's getting close, right? Like, I don't know. Um, we'll see what happens when it finally sells, but it might not be the best deal ever. But I think that to go buy this and to run it like that, if you had the resources to, be and I think you could do it with very little down, right? Like, you could probably go get a first mortgage from a hard money lender, convince, the Dow to sell it to you, pay them full price and a decent interest rate as with their position in second. A lot of hard money lenders will let you do that, and maybe even still lend you the construction funds. Maybe you need to spend, bring some of your own capital to do that. But I mean, I think you could get into this deal really low, right? So like, this is one, I think that's a no-brainer, right? I think that if I were in St. Louis, this is the same thing. Like, this would be really easy to, just come give them an unsolicited offer. Say, hey, look, I'll buy this. I'll pay off the debt because I know this has some debt. It's got like 12 or $13,000 in debt, and then then it's mine, my responsibility. All of a sudden, I pay the taxes, I pay the insurance, I'm paying for the AC because this needs a new AC that hasn't been purchased yet, and so then that's off the books, and then all of a sudden you're just getting interest payments, right? I think I'm fairly certain I'd vote for somebody to take this, to buy this from us with owner financing, and I think most of the other owners have become pretty comfortable with that idea. If I were in this market, I'd do that, and I would go find somebody who's successfully running other Airbnbs in my area and say, "Hey, you want to partner up with this, or maybe I'll do it myself." Um, but I hate the idea of trying to do this without having visited the property, without knowing, is this neighborhood really similar to the ones right by, nearby that have those very successful ones? Are they doing something that isn't obvious from the pictures? Like, is there something is there a building right next door to this one that's become run down and a problem, right? Like, all of these things are hard to figure out if you're not local. And you can get that information secondhand, but it is something that, and I mean, this is like a super cheap property. I think we'd sell this for 90 or maybe 100 with owner financing. Maybe you put down 20K or something. I mean, whatever it is. But I think that there's an opportunity there, because I think for a lot of these properties, the problem is the platform. The plot, it's not, so yes, this is not a, St. Louis is not a great market. The long-term rental market there has, very, very large occupancy or vacancy. But I was shocked when I was looking through the short-term rentals to see that they do pretty well. And I think it's probably in large part because there's a couple of colleges there. I really don't know what people visit St. Louis for, but it seems like the ones, a lot of the ones that do pretty well are these like little two-bedroom homes. You're probably just competing directly with, a hotel, but it's something where you've got your own kitchen and whatnot. Um, Now, maybe you'd need to spend more money on this to make it equivalent to What some of the other ones are, I don't really know, right? And one of the things too is this one there seems to be some discrepancy in what the actual size is. Some place that where I looked, it made me think it's actually bigger than this 567, but I don't know. Same thing for, Penhurst. I mean, this is one. I think we've lost another buyer on this. One of the offers that we received, we didn't, I don't know, we took forever to counter them. I don't think that we gave them a reasonable, I think we eventually gave them a reasonable counter, but we initially just rejected it. But, a lot of the other owners in this were like, oh, I would buy it for what they're offering. And it's like, okay, well, I think we can get a deal. I think you could get a deal similar to that, right? So I think there's this opportunity to be a counterparty to the Dows right now, and make some money. And then Lipford too. Like, I mean, I think that this is one where, we haven't voted to sell it yet. But if somebody came up to us and said, "Hey, I'll give you X dollars," that seems like a fair price. You got to own or finance it to me. And then that person was local and they had gone through the property and they understood, yes, I can make this a 3-2, and as a 3-2, it's worth this much more than it is in the current configuration, because this property says it's a 4-2, but it's not. No reasonable person would agree with that. I mean, two of the bedrooms you have to walk through to get to other bedrooms. At least in most markets I've ever worked in, that isn't how anybody that nobody really considers that a bedroom, right? Even though they're calling it a walk-through bedroom. So anyway, maybe in some places that's acceptable, and maybe this is one of them. But I think, and this is one of those where if you spent a few minutes in the home and you had a little bit of understanding of construction and some, maybe you might have to go up in the attic and look and see like how what it, how the structure is and whatnot, maybe crawl underneath the property. But I think you probably are just cutting a couple of door holes in here, closing up a couple of walls, and then really the other thing is figuring out like how to make the kitchen a little bit, the configuration work better. But that's always easier to do when you're in the home. I don't understand what this, I mean, I guess this is a bump out for a closet that was built in the one of the walk-through bedrooms. But okay, if that's not a bedroom anymore, because because it's not really anyway, can we get rid of that? And then does that make this a much more reasonable kitchen? Like I think it probably does. And like all of that, it seems like could be accomplished with just drywall. But again, it's not something that I think most of the managers or co-owners or anybody is really capable of running that very well. I mean, some of them are, but I mean, like it's. I think it's been obvious too that we've spread the few competent co-owners that we have way too thin lately, right? I mean, some of them um, have just taken on a ton of new work, and it's definitely making it so they're not paying the same amount of attention to a lot of the ones that they were initially. Um, And I think the more like of these sort of ridiculous, in a project like this, is it really even worth it for them, right? Because what are they going to get out of it? Like maybe we pay them a project management fee, maybe I mean, it's just tough to know. So I really think the more I think about it, that the overall structure of how we run things in the DAOs, I think it needs to move closer to and when I say a sponsor model, I mean that, when you're doing syndications, you have the sponsor, that's who puts the deal together, that's who goes out and raises the money. That is the general partner of the deal, right? And so, that's the person who's really driving the bus. And in that model, the limited partners probably have too little control. So in order for their securities rules is why I think the whole the setup that they're using here is. But I think there has to be a way to give them a little bit more uh, you know, a little bit more control that can't be taken away, because that's one of the things that people are like, oh, well, you can just vote to give them authority to do whatever. But like, if we can always just vote to take that away and to change it, then it's sort of, it needs to be built in such a way that, um, maybe you need a even stronger vote to overcome it, right? Like, certain rights and powers of the people that are really running the deal, I think should be respected more than others, and it should be like just one. Okay, if we're going to sell, if we're going to refinance, either of those, yes, of course. Let's do a vote for those big capital events. Beyond that, maybe we need to be betting on the jockey a little bit more than the horse, right? Like picking the co-owner as much as we're picking the properties themselves. Um, and I think that's sort of what, like, when I'm talking about Mogul. Oh, before I forget, please like and subscribe. In the description to this video, I have links to all the other sites where I currently invest in fractional real estate. Do your own due diligence on those sites. Just because I like some of them or don't like some of them doesn't mean it's the right answer for you. Same thing with any of the properties on there, or any of the properties I've talked about today. You want to do your own due diligence on all of them. Um, don't just take my word for it. I'm just some dude sitting on my couch talking about fractional real estate investing, right? Like, do not take my advice. Dig into those things on your own. And then on top of that, there is a link in the description of this video to a Discord that I've set up where there's getting very close to 100 of us now. If it's not that many, but all people that are interested in fractional real estate investing, talking about it on a regular basis. Um, but yeah, so where I was starting to go with that is, when I invest on Mogul, I think what I really like about them is it is their team, that the guys that are picking the deals, the people that are making the decisions for the properties. Now, the property managers are doing the day-to-day stuff, but they're the ones making the deals with the property managers. They're the ones providing that oversight. Um, and I think that that's what we're really, I think that becomes really hard when you have 150 owners in a property. None of them own a big enough amount for it to be worth their time to really dig into, to look at the financials on every single property every month, to really dig into, is there something that we could change? And like, honestly, real estate is a physical asset, right? It is something that it's very often that I will look at a home online and I'll think, that's an okay deal. And I'll go in there and I'll see something that will make it a great deal. And the opposite happens too. I'll see one that looks like on paper, wow, that's a good deal. I walk in there, the floor plan's terrible, or the view isn't what it seems like it should be, or all sorts of different things. The neighbors have multiple cars up on blocks. I mean, there's all these things that if you're not physically in the home, it's very difficult to make a really informed decision. And so where we don't have, uh, we don't have anybody that has the experience and eyes on most of these properties. um, I think it's problematic. Now, I want to make sure it's clear. That doesn't mean I think that Lofty just shouldn't exist, right? Like, I think it could work. I think it works with a stronger co-ownership model where, one, where they're really picking experienced co-owners, right? Like that might be, um, where there needs to be some qualifications in order to do this, right? Like, I shouldn't be able to just, okay, this is the one property that I own and I'm going to go and sell stuff on there. And if they're not willing to do that, well, then maybe us as investors need to just like boycott deals from co-owners that don't seem like they know what they're doing, right? Uh, which is a lot of them, and that is, problematic. And the real issue too is some of them act like they're going to be active and involved and, interested, but it's because they're trying to sell out some equity, and then once it's sold, we hardly ever hear from them, or maybe never hear from them again. And so, having a little bit more of a professional co-owner slash sponsor model, I think, is what makes more sense. Um, or picking properties where you're just really not going to run into a change of use. Like, so slightly larger multifamily, you're not, there's not going to be a situation where, oh, I'm going to change it to rent by the room, or I'm going to change it to short-term rental. Now, even that, I think the reason it works is because the managers for those types of properties, when you hire a third party manager, tend to be more hands-on professional property managers, that are used to making a lot more decisions, because you have more, you already have a lot of like fractional ownership groups, like people that just, like ticks and and syndications. Well, although in that instance you have the sponsor as well, but I think they're just really set up a little bit better for it. I was talking about doing single tenant, triple net stuff. The more I think about that, you still really need the good sponsor that's able to deal with it when it does become vacant or when we have to negotiate lease bumps and stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I guess there's just not that many, um, not that many instances where there is an asset in its real estate, and I think that you don't need to, have somebody experience involved. And I guess that's why I've been critical of a lot of the platforms who don't have any real estate experience on their team, because I think that this has kind of been lost on them. Like they've had all these iterations of failing sort of models where they had the turnkey providers that were selling them homes, and I mean, basically been bamboozled by like all of the typical grifters in real estate, and it's because they didn't know that, yeah, nobody that's a legitimate investor is buying from the majority of turnkey providers, right? Like, I mean, those people have a business set up to sell to people who have no idea what they're doing. And like, I mean, the list goes on, and we've talked about lots of them, right? Of why, they need that experience. But I think even the DAOs themselves need more experienced, person, or at least a more involved, right? I'm sure most of these DAOs have at least a couple of us that are invested in the deals that also really know a lot about real estate, have invested a lot, and have. But if none of us have this enough skin in the game to really be on top of each of them regularly, and or aren't local to them, aren't don't have the ability to really dig into the property itself. Stop, like, the fact that we had to hire a locksmith twice blows my mind. Like, um, it's one of the things, like, just, to have being an agent that works with um, mostly or entirely investment properties. I got myself a set of lockpicks years ago, right? I mean, it's like getting into properties is part of the job, right? I mean, and so it's, and usually it's pretty simple, right? Most properties are not like fortresses, right? Like, but so the fact that, like, that, prices like that add up, there's just all sorts of little reasons why, um, that you need that local experienced person, or someone who's just a real ninja at using remote help for things. I mean, I think that's kind of, I lump Earl into that group, right? Like, like I said, he's done a real good job with some of the stuff. One, I think he's getting spread really thin right now, but the other, I think there are still limits to it, right? Um, and like listing Odom has really shown that, right? Like, we had it listed, and then, oh, the power was off, and then we couldn't get in, and for the day that we're trying to do the open house, like, we just had all these problems that, if, this is my market and it's my property and it's down the street, I'm just going to run over there and fix the problem. That sort of last minute emergency, low skill um, thing is something that is real. I think that's one of the hardest things to replace at this point, and that's I don't know. So anyway, that's the problem. But then, like I said, I think it's creating this huge opportunity if you want to be a real world investor to sort of start plucking some properties off the site. And I mean, you don't have to pick the ones that I'm invested in. I think everyone that I mentioned today, you'd probably get a yes vote if you try, if you came at them with a creative deal that um, you know, makes them relatively happy from a money standpoint, but also gives you a lot of leeway as far as, like, maybe you get a low rate, maybe you get a certain amount of time where you're not making any payments, something like that could be really helpful. Maybe you're getting interest only. Like, that's something we're offering on Odom. Um, I don't know. I think that we're probably some of the most flexible sellers as far as when it comes to structuring, especially on the deals where, we just feel real stuck, right? And I think there's a lot of those deals on the platform right now. So let's get them moved off, right? I wish I lived in one of these markets, because I really thought about going up to Fort Worth, but it is just a little bit, it's too far for me to want to do that. But I spent a lot of time today thinking about, should I buy, should I just try to buy Odom myself and take it off the platform, right? And then one thing too is maybe you do that, maybe you do whatever business plan to get it running and working the way you want, and then in a year or two, if you want to bring it back to the platform and then trade out and get, sell your equity and then go buy some others. I mean, I'm not saying you have to abandon the platform completely. I'm just a big believer in taking what the market gives you, right? Like that's one of the things that I always talk to investors that are coming to buy stuff here. Like, my business model has changed a lot. I used to mostly do multifamily. I switched from, slightly larger multifamily down to like fourplexes and duplexes became more of a focus. There's been times where I focused a lot on condos, on vacant land for construction or land to flip with financing. The last several years, my team's mostly sold short-term rentals. And right now we're kind of shifting to see, because I think that we're going to see a lot more co-living happening, and so we're trying to get, trying to really understand that market better and do more of that. And I've invested in a couple of those deals because I want to really get how they work well. And so the reason we've changed isn't because I'm flighty and get bored. It's because what works in our market from year to year changes. And so, I want to be on top of that. And so what's going to work on Lofty or on any of these fractional sites also, I think, changes, right? I mean, there might be a time where the only thing that makes sense is to buy a cheap token, sell the property in real life. But there might be other opportunities too, right? I mean, I think there's certain times where changing a business model might work, and all sorts of things. Like I think maybe just need a new property manager, but whatever it is, having that flexibility and seeing the opportunity, I think is where uh, what we need to do as investors. And so for me, I just have really started to think about, well, what's the opportunity? Is there a real opportunity to buy stuff from the DAOs right now? And I already was talking about. I think Lofty, the whole ecosystem is going to be better off if we get some of these trash properties off of there. And yes, I think they're trash properties in their current configuration with the way we run things. But I think a lot of these could turn into great deals with that hands-on management and ownership that we just don't have here. Um, I think that I've belabored that point enough. Uh, have you thought at all about buying stuff from any of the DAOs? If you have, stick it in the comments or jump into the Discord and let me know, because I think it would be interesting, to see who else is sort of on that train of thought. I think that, I know we have somebody who's thinking about kind of like rent to own, who's already a tenant in a property, has been buying some, and maybe wants to buy that property eventually. I don't know. But I can't think of, I don't know if there's anybody else who's really considered, hey, should we buy this from the DAO because, a better business plan, a better capital structure, whatever it is, could turn it into a great deal where on the platform it's kind of stuck. Anyway, that is it for me for today. Until next time, I'm going to keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.